And this is some guidelines that we made up previously. I notice it says PowerPoint up there. You're not doing a PowerPoint, so I need to take that off. But I have posted this on the MyFire for the website. MyFire site, so you can see it for our course. So basically, it's just some things you can read and look at yourself, and some things to remember. So the paper that you're doing, going to do is an expansion of one of the ones you've already done. All right. So this was designed that way to save you time and to allow you to look at 8 different things before you chose one. You might decide that one you're not as interested in, or that one wouldn't work as well. So in other words, one of the other either film or book papers, research that you did weekly or almost weekly, let's say every other week, needs to be expanded into a paper. Does that make sense? So the guideline is, that's similar to what's in the syllabus. But what I want to try to do here is see if I can get this to move a little bit. So what should you actually do, whether it is a film or a novel? And we've already said a lot of this stuff, but this is just to try to put it in a written form and a condensed form. So there is an actual story, right? What is the actual story? What's the actual history? If the events that you're watching are actually about a real person, or they're set in a time, that sort of thing, you can research the events around it. Okay, so research the actual story using historical evidence, because this is a research class. I mean, this is supposed to be a real class, right? So.
And in the case of McKenna's question, obviously the Count of Monte Cristo was not a real person. Spoiler alert. But
Darn.
France really did exist during that time, and so researching what France was like, what
France was like, and politics, the power, the prisons, what prisons were like at the time, or punishment, that sort of crime and punishment at the time. So you can, if the actual sort of central character is like, say, in Gladiator, okay, that's not a real person. There was no Maximus.
What?
Again, spoiler alert.
Only in our hearts. You're right.
So there was none. Now, in the same guy, only transformed in history, because he does that thing where he's, what is he, one of those Scottish, it's a guy that jumps in time.
Highlander or something.
Yeah, he's a Highlander, and he comes into Braveheart. Now, William Wallace was a real guy, whereas Maximus was not. So we got 2 different guys, but there, maybe there's really all one guy.
Well, that's honestly how are a bunch of Scottish Highlanders with no armor defeating Englishmen with armor?
Well, did they defeat him or not? That's the question. You can research William Wallace. You could research the time period. You could research the way people, say, fought or lived at that time.
What armor did they really have?
What kind of weapons did they have? And then you can actually do research, a lot of research on William Wallace and his life, especially in that movie, like Braveheart. You can really compare that. Maximus, since he does not exist, what you'd have to do is look at the way gladiators fought. And then you need to look, because they do tie it to Marcus Aurelius as the emperor. So you have a chronological period, and then what was it like then in the life, and this idea that Marcus Aurelius really wanted to turn Rome into a republic again and get rid of the empire. Was that true? I can tell you it was not. But anyway. There was the idea that Rome always wanted to sort of pretend that they were still a republic. So maybe that was true. So anyway, you can look at what?
They still had consuls, right?
Well, yeah, sort of, but they weren't didn't have the power. Yes, they did have them. So anyway, so what? How does it relate? Can you look at any primary sources? And of course, that could be a lot of different things. What are primary sources?
Firsthand.
Or actually there.
What'd you say?
Like either like eyewitnesses, people, or like written things that were actually on the scene.
Okay, it could, obviously, if we're talking about William Wallace, we don't have anybody still alive.
Any
Like documents or photos from that time.
Okay,
stuff
document.
written during the time.
Okay, it could be things written from that time period, but of course, in later periods, it could be film clips, it could be pictures, it could be paintings, things like that, and it could even be a building. That sort of thing. I mean, it could be a structure, perhaps, or an object could actually become a primary source. Okay, anyway, so you can look at all those things. Then you research the historical background of whatever it is you're going to do. Then you can research the making of that film or the writing of that novel and see what you can find out. How much attention do they claim to be following?
And this part is really easy, especially for anything made since 1980, to find interviews with the filmmakers, because after they make the film, they go around on these press junkets and they do all of these magazine and television interviews in which people ask them questions. So it's really easy to find interviews with the directors and the stars. I do want to clarify that first sentence there. I'm not saying you should cut out facts and details. I'm saying, why did the filmmakers
It should be
cut out
question.
facts or details? Yes, well, perhaps it should have been proofread a little bit better since
Yeah.
before it went up there. But
Yeah, so,
why
for,
did they make the decisions that they made?
and of course, a lot of this is going to come up, like it says down here, it comes up in the lectures. There is a telescoping of time, we talk about that kind. They leave some things out, like say, if they're going to cover 50 years of a person's life, obviously, you don't want to watch a 50-year film, a 50-year-long film. It shows what the guy does every day. So you're obviously going to leave some things out. The guy gets up at 7 and he eats cereal for breakfast. You don't want all that. So you're purposely cutting things out. But the question is, what did they cut out? And did they cut out important things, or did they put characters together? That really, these are 3 characters, they made it into one.
And it's very easy to find those primary sources because those people all gave interviews and said,
So-
well, we created this character for, whatever.
Yeah, sometimes they just make up a character to be a device to move the film along. Like, spoiler alert, that Marky Mark film, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that already, right? The Patriot. There was no
Patriots Day.
Patriots Day. Patriots Day. Patriots Day. There was no police officer like the main character of the film. That
And you
was-
can find an interview with the
But his
director
actions are
and with
based
Marky
off of
Mark
what real people
saying,
did.
well, we created this character in order to.
So sometimes the person is there as the observer to tell the story, and they weren't there at all. Sometimes maybe it's multiple people and they put them together. Anyway, that's the kind of thing you need to look for. Why are they doing that? Of course, there are time constraints. With a film, you got maybe 2 hours, or I guess if you're really patient, maybe 3 hours or an hour and a half. With a novel, 2, 3, 4, 500 pages. And how many pages are you going to put in? So you can look at that. Then remember the stuff that was said in class, because a lot of this stuff we go over it in class. Not for everything that you are doing, but in general. Like today, costume dramas, we talked about some elements of costume dramas, some of the ways in which they go. We talked about anachronisms today, right? How sometimes things purposely put in, sometimes things accidentally, mistakes that are put in, and so forth. All right. So then, as you get ready to do this, and you've chosen your film or book, how do you go about doing it? One of the things in any paper that people do for me anyway, and I assume this is for other professors as well, is that people take a much too broad approach. In other words, somebody will say, like I'll have a class in Egypt, and somebody will say, I want to write a paper about Egyptian religion. Well, I'll say, yeah, okay, you can write about Egyptian religion, but that's too much. Or I want to write about, some broad, sweeping thing. So even when it comes to, say, like a film like Braveheart, there's a lot of elements to that film that you could write about. So you need to zero in on some things and really do. In other words, what I tell people is what you don't really want is sort of an encyclopedia article. You're really wanting a research paper. Okay, so you don't just sort of give a brief, kind of a glittery overview of the whole thing, and you get to your pages and then you stop. You need to have something that you're actually examining. Okay, so if you're doing like the movie Braveheart, one of the things you could do is up there, is you could really just focus in on who was William Wallace and how is William Wallace portrayed in the film. There are other things you can talk about along the way. Or English imperialism. These are all ideas that are in the film. So, narrow or focus your topic so that you won't get too out of place, like All the President's Men, if you know that film. It's about Watergate. So, we talk about news sources or sort of reporting. Washington Post was the paper and so forth. There's a lot of things you may look at, or the events of Watergate, or the whole thing surrounding Nixon. There's different things you can look at there. Now, then you need to look for credible sources. And of course, this works for about any kind of paper writing. You need credible sources. So be sure that you're actually researching, for this class, researching the history, the events that are portrayed or around the film, not just the film itself. The film was filmed in 1987, and it took 6 months to make it, and just like the budget and all these things. Those things might come into play, but those are not what we're looking for. We're not looking at the history of the making of the details of the film, but we're looking at how it. Remember the name of the course. The name of the course is History Through Popular Culture, right? Because people are learning rightly or wrongly, or thinking they're learning history when they watch these films. So when they watch the film All the President's Men, they think that they're learning what actually happened in the events surrounding Watergate. Now the question is, are they? Are they learning accurate things, or are they not? Or when they watch Braveheart, they think they're actually learning about the independence of Scotland and the Battle of William Wallace and so forth. Well, are they? And people leave that film, and that shapes the way they look at Scottish history. That shapes the way they look at William Wallace and lots of other things. So the question is, how accurate is it? And then to write it as an academic paper, part of it will depend on whether you're doing a film or a book, and then what kind you are doing, right? So,
Read that last line, that's important.
you are not just interpreting history, you are interpreting someone else's interpretation of history, and that requires analysis, understanding of context and culture, not just a summary of the facts. So overall, this is to be an analysis, not just a summary. Obviously, summary might come into play in what you're writing to help you analyze, but don't just say, okay, the movie starts here, and then it moves to here, and then they do this and they do that. Yes?
Will we need a certain number of words for our whole project?
Yes, I believe it says in the syllabus 8 to 10 pages. 8 to 10 pages.
What about the grading of the ones we've done already? Not the research paper, obviously.
Yeah, some of them have been graded. I don't think they're all graded yet. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I don't have any grades for any of them.
Yeah.
You don't? Okay. Well, let me take a look at that. We'll be working on that if it's not there. Yes.
Quizzes and discussions,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
papers.
Yes.
Just to be clear, this research paper is one of the reviews that we do, and it's expanded.
You're to take one of the 8 things you've done and make it into this paper. I don't think it's just expanding it. I think it'd be redoing it.
So, re-reviewing something we've already reviewed, basically. basically.
It doesn't have to be something you've
No, it
already
has to
reviewed, but it
expand.
is one of the